Part 1. The Stoic Lens. Why toxic people have power over us. There is a quiet struggle that almost everyone faces, yet few talk about openly. It is not the struggle against poverty, illness, or physical danger, but the struggle of dealing with other people. People who drain our energy, provoke our anger, manipulate our emotions, or quietly erode our peace of mind. These are often labeled toxic people, and while the word is modern, the problem is ancient. More than 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosophers wrote extensively about this exact challenge. They did not use the word toxic, but they described arrogance, cruelty, envy, deceit, entitlement, and irrational behavior with striking clarity. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journal, what we now call Meditations, reminded himself daily that he would encounter meddling, ungrateful, aggressive, treacherous, and selfish people. Not as an exception, but as a certainty. Stoicism does not promise a world without difficult people. It promises something more realistic and more powerful, a way to remain unshaken by them. Before we can understand how to deal with toxic people, we must first understand why they affect us so deeply. The Stoics believe that the distress we experience is rarely caused by others themselves, but by the judgments we make about their behavior. This idea can feel uncomfortable at first because it seems to shift responsibility inward. But this shift is precisely where freedom begins. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of Stoicism's most influential teachers, taught a simple but radical principle. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Our opinions, values, intentions, and actions belong to us. Other people's thoughts, moods, and behaviors do not. The moment we expect others to behave according to our standards, we surrender our inner peace to forces we cannot command. Toxic people often gain power over us because we unknowingly grant it to them. We react emotionally, replay conversations in our minds, fantasize about what we should have said, or worry about what they might do next. In Stoic terms, we are allowing externals, things outside our control, to disturb our inner state. This does not mean that toxic behavior is acceptable, harmless, or imaginary. Stoicism is not passive endurance or emotional suppression. It is clarity. It is the ability to see situations as they are, without exaggeration, and to respond deliberately rather than reflexively. A Stoic approach begins with a sober observation. People act according to their understanding of what is good for them. When someone lies, manipulates, or lashes out, they are not doing so because they want to be evil. They are acting out of ignorance, fear, insecurity, or deeply ingrained habits. Marcus Aurelius wrote that people who do wrong are mistaken about what is truly good. This does not excuse their behavior, but it explains it. An explanation is the enemy of resentment. Resentment thrives on the belief that things should be otherwise. Stoicism teaches us to replace that belief with acceptance, not as surrender, but as realism. You do not stand in the rain and curse the sky for being wet. You either step inside or bring an umbrella. In the same way, you do not demand that toxic people suddenly become virtuous. You decide how close you stand to them and how exposed you allow yourself to be. Before identifying the different types of toxic people, it is crucial to dismantle one illusion, that there is a perfect response that will change them. Stoicism is not about fixing others. It is about governing yourself. The Stoics were deeply skeptical of our ability to reform people through argument or emotional appeals. They believed that character changes slowly, if at all, and only through personal insight. This realization can be sobering, but it is also liberating. If your peace depends on changing someone else, you are trapped. If your peace depends on your own character and choices, you are free. Another key Stoic insight is that exposure to difficult people is not a misfortune, but a training ground. Just as muscles grow through resistance, virtue grows through challenge. Patience, courage, Self-control and wisdom cannot be developed in isolation. They require friction. Toxic people, unpleasant as they are, offer that friction daily. Seneca wrote that we should treat adversity as a drill, not a disaster. When you encounter a manipulative coworker or a chronically negative relative, Stoicism asks a provocative question: what virtue is this situation demanding from me right now? Is it patience? Is it firmness? Is it the courage to set boundaries or the wisdom to disengage? This reframing changes the emotional texture of the encounter. Instead of feeling victimized, you become an active participant in your own development. The toxic person remains who they are, but their role in your life changes. They become a test, not a tyrant. At this point, it is important to clarify what Stoicism is not. It is not emotional numbness. The Stoics experienced anger, frustration, and disappointment like anyone else. What distinguished them was their refusal to let those emotions dictate their actions or define their identity. They aimed not to eliminate emotion, but to prevent it from becoming destructive. They also did not advocate staying in abusive situations. Stoicism values justice, dignity, and rational self-preservation. There is a difference between enduring inconvenience and tolerating harm. Knowing when to distance yourself is not weakness, it is wisdom. With this foundation in place, we can begin to explore the specific forms that toxic behavior takes. Toxicity is not a single personality type. It appears in many disguises, some loud and obvious, others subtle and socially acceptable. Each type requires a slightly different Stoic response, grounded in the same core principles: control what you can, accept what you cannot, and act in accordance with reason and virtue. In the next part, we will examine the first major category of toxic people: those who thrive on conflict, attention, and emotional reactions. We will explore why they behave the way they do, why they are so effective at pulling others into their storms, and how Stoicism teaches us to remain calm and unreachable in the presence of provocation. Part 2: the provokers and the agitators, mastering emotional triggers. Among all toxic personalities, the most immediately draining are those who thrive on emotional reaction. These are the people who provoke, antagonize, belittle, or stir conflict not necessarily because of the issue at hand, but because emotional intensity itself is rewarding to them. They may appear as bullies, chronic arguers, passive-aggressive critics, or individuals who always seem to know exactly which buttons to press. From a Stoic perspective, these people are not powerful because of their words or actions. They are powerful because they understand, intuitively or deliberately, how reactive most people are. They exploit a fundamental human weakness: our tendency to equate emotional impulse with truth. Epictetus warned that when someone insults you, it is not the insult itself that harms you, but your judgment that it is harmful. This does not mean that insults are pleasant or acceptable. It means that their power lies in the meaning we assign to them. The provocateur's success depends entirely on our cooperation. These individuals often escalate situations because escalation feeds them. Anger, defensiveness, embarrassment, and outrage signal that their tactics are working. When you respond emotionally, you are no longer acting according to reason. You are reacting according to impulse. Stoicism identifies this moment as the point of vulnerability. The Stoic response begins with awareness. Before you can master your reaction, you must notice the internal shift that occurs when provoked. There is usually a physical sensation: tension in the jaw, a tightening in the chest, a rush of heat. This is the moment Marcus Aurelius urged himself to pause. He reminded himself that he was dealing with a human being acting according to their nature, and that his own nature was rational and social. Instead of asking, "How do I win this exchange?" the Stoic asks, "What is the appropriate response for a rational person?" Often the answer is not clever rebuttal, but restraint. Silence, when used deliberately, is one of the most powerful Stoic tools. It denies the provocateur the reaction they seek. This is not avoidance or fear. It is strategic disengagement. Seneca wrote that no one can provoke you unless you allow them to do so. Silence communicates that their words do not govern your inner state. This does not mean you must tolerate ongoing disrespect. Stoicism does not require submission. There is a difference between emotional reactivity and firm assertion. A calm, measured boundary, delivered without anger, is far more effective than a heated defense. When you speak from reason rather than emotion, you reclaim authority over the situation. Another Stoic technique is reframing. Provokers often appear intimidating or dominant, but Stoicism encourages us to see them differently. Ask yourself, what kind of person needs to provoke others to feel powerful? The answer is rarely flattering. Such behavior often signals insecurity, lack of self-mastery, or a desperate need for validation. Seeing this does not make you superior. It makes you less reactive. Marcus Aurelius advised himself to view offensive behavior as he would the barking of a dog or the braying of a donkey, not with contempt, but with realism. These sounds are expressions of nature, not personal attacks. In the same way, provocation is an expression of character, not a measure of your worth. This mental shift weakens the emotional charge of the encounter. When you stop interpreting provocation as a threat to your identity, it loses much of its force. You no longer feel compelled to defend yourself because there is nothing under attack. A particularly subtle form of provocation is sarcasm disguised as humor. These individuals cloak criticism in jokes, making it socially risky to object. The Stoic response remains the same: clarity without hostility. You may calmly ask for clarification or state your discomfort without accusation. If the behavior continues, withdrawal becomes a rational choice. Stoicism emphasizes that we are not obligated to remain in environments that corrode our character. Endurance is virtuous only when it serves a higher purpose. Prolonged exposure to hostility can distort your own behavior, making you irritable, suspicious, or reactive. The Stoics were acutely aware of this danger. They believed that character is shaped by habit and company. For this reason, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to return often to his inner citadel, a metaphor for the mental space where reason governs and external chaos is kept at bay. When dealing with agitators, retreating to this inner citadel means refusing to let their energy dictate your mood or behavior. Another powerful Stoic practice is premeditation. Before entering situations where provocation is likely, difficult meetings, family gatherings, or interactions with known agitators, you mentally prepare. You remind yourself that you will likely encounter rudeness or hostility and that this is not surprising. When it happens, you are not caught off guard and your response is steadier. This practice strips toxic behavior of its shock value. What we expect does not destabilize us. What surprises us often does. Stoicism also cautions against the desire to teach or correct provocateurs in the heat of the moment. Rational discussion requires a willingness to engage in good faith. Many toxic individuals are not seeking understanding. They are seeking dominance or reaction. Engaging them as if they are open to reason often leads to frustration. Epictetus advised choosing battles carefully, not because truth is unimportant, but because energy is finite. Wasting it on those who cannot or will not listen is a form of self-sabotage. The Stoic does not measure success by winning arguments, but by maintaining integrity and peace. It is also worth acknowledging that we can become provocateurs ourselves. Stoicism demands honesty, and part of dealing with toxic behavior is recognizing it within us. When we feel the urge to escalate, to mock, or to retaliate, Stoicism asks us to pause and examine that impulse. Self-mastery begins at home. By mastering your reactions to provokers and agitators, you reclaim one of the most important Stoic freedoms, the freedom not to be emotionally controlled by others. This does not make life conflict-free, but it makes conflict manageable. In the next part, we will turn to a different often more insidious category of toxic people, those who manipulate through guilt, dependency, and emotional obligation. These individuals rarely raise their voices, yet they can exert profound influence over our choices and sense of self. We will explore how Stoicism exposes their tactics and teaches us to set boundaries without cruelty or guilt. Part 3. The Manipulators and the Guilt Weavers. Reclaiming Inner Authority. Not all toxic people are loud or confrontational. Some are quiet, subtle, and outwardly reasonable. They do not provoke anger. They cultivate obligation. Their influence is not built on intimidation, but on guilt, emotional dependency, and a carefully managed sense of responsibility. These are the manipulators and guilt weavers, and they are often the hardest to recognize. Unlike agitators, manipulators rarely appear hostile. They may present themselves as victims, martyrs, or misunderstood helpers. They remind you of past favors, emphasize their sacrifices, or imply that your boundaries are acts of betrayal. Over time, interactions with them leave you feeling drained, confused, and vaguely ashamed, even when you have done nothing objectively wrong. Stoicism offers a powerful lens for understanding this dynamic, beginning with a distinction that is easy to forget. Responsibility is not the same as control. You are responsible for your choices and character. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions, expectations, or happiness. Manipulators blur this boundary intentionally or unconsciously. They encourage you to take ownership of their feelings, to believe that their disappointment or distress is evidence of your moral failure. Stoicism dismantles this illusion by returning us to first principles. Epictetus taught that each person is the guardian of their own mind. If someone feels hurt, offended, or disappointed, those feelings arise from their judgments, not from your mere existence or autonomy. This does not mean you should act without compassion. It means compassion does not require self-betrayal. One of the most common tools of manipulation is selective generosity. The manipulator gives, but the giving is never free. It is recorded, remembered, and later used as leverage. Stoicism urges us to see gifts clearly. A true gift does not demand repayment. When repayment is expected, the exchange is a transaction, and transactions must be evaluated rationally. Seneca wrote extensively about favors and obligations, warning that resentment grows when expectations are hidden. A Stoic response is clarity. You do not need to accuse or confront. You simply decide internally what you are willing to give freely and what you are not. When expectations exceed that boundary, you decline calmly. Another manipulative tactic is emotional fragility. The manipulator presents themselves as easily hurt, overwhelmed, or incapable of coping without your support. While vulnerability is human, chronic helplessness can become a strategy. Stoicism recognizes the danger of confusing kindness with submission. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that helping others is part of our social duty, but helping does not mean absorbing their chaos. You can offer support without surrendering your autonomy. You can listen without agreeing. You can care without complying. A key Stoic practice here is separating intention from outcome. You may intend to act with fairness and goodwill, but you cannot guarantee that others will interpret your actions favorably. If someone responds to your reasonable boundary with guilt-tripping or emotional pressure, that response belongs to them. This is where many people struggle. Guilt feels like evidence. It feels like proof that something is wrong. Stoicism teaches us to interrogate that feeling. Ask yourself, have I acted unjustly, or am I merely uncomfortable with someone else's displeasure? These are not the same. Discomfort is not a moral failure. In fact, growth often requires it. Manipulators often rely on ambiguity. They imply rather than state. They sigh instead of asking. They hint instead of requesting. This allows them to maintain deniability while still exerting pressure. The Stoic response is to bring interactions back to reason and clarity. You may ask direct questions. You may request explicit expectations. You may state your limits plainly. Doing so removes the fog in which manipulation thrives. Reason is light, and toxic dynamics prefer darkness. Stoicism also warns against over-identification with roles. Being a good child, a supportive friend, or a reliable colleague can become a trap when these identities override your judgment. When identity replaces reason, manipulation becomes easier. Epictetus advised that we should play our roles well, but never forget that they are roles. You are not your usefulness. You are not your compliance. Your worth does not increase when you sacrifice your peace. Another subtle form of manipulation involves urgency. The manipulator frames their needs as immediate and non-negotiable, forcing you to decide under emotional pressure. Stoicism teaches us to slow down. Time restores perspective. Rarely is a situation as dire as it is presented. By delaying response, you reclaim agency. You give reason a chance to speak before emotion takes over. This simple pause can dismantle entire patterns of manipulation. Stoicism does not ask us to confront manipulators aggressively or to expose them publicly. It asks us to become less manipulable. When guilt no longer controls your decisions, the manipulator loses leverage. Often, the dynamic changes without a single argument. It is also important to recognize that manipulators are often trapped in their own patterns. They rely on others because they do not trust themselves. This recognition can foster compassion without compliance. You can wish them well without sacrificing your boundaries. Ultimately, Stoicism reframes the central question. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid disappointing them?" you ask, "What does reason and virtue require of me here?" The answer may involve kindness, distance, or firm refusal. What matters is that the choice is deliberate and grounded in self-respect. In the next part, we will explore another widespread and corrosive form of toxicity: chronic negativity, pessimism, and victimhood. These individuals may not manipulate directly, but their worldview can quietly infect those around them. We will examine how Stoicism protects mental clarity and emotional resilience in the presence of relentless pessimism. Part 4. The perpetual victims and the chronic negatives. Guarding the inner climate. Some toxic people do not attack, manipulate, or provoke. Instead, they erode. Their presence is marked by complaint, pessimism, and a persistent sense of victimhood. Every situation is unfair, every effort is futile, and every outcome is someone else's fault. Time spent with them leaves you heavier than before, as though the air itself has thickened. These individuals are not always malicious. Many are sincerely suffering. Yet Stoicism teaches us that suffering, when repeatedly externalized and left unexamined, can become a way of life. Chronic negativity is not just a mood, it is a worldview. And worldviews are contagious. The Stoics were keenly aware of this danger. Marcus Aurelius warned that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you constantly absorb despair, cynicism, and resentment, your own thinking will gradually reflect it, often without conscious consent. The first Stoic insight in dealing with chronic negativity is recognizing that you are not obligated to validate distorted perceptions of reality. Listening does not require agreement. Compassion does not require adoption. Perpetual victims tend to interpret life through a rigid narrative. They are powerless, the world is hostile, and improvement is impossible. This narrative protects them from responsibility, but it also imprisons them. Stoicism directly challenges this mindset, emphasizing agency, choice, and the capacity to respond wisely even under difficult circumstances. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control events, we can always control how we relate to them. Chronic negativity rejects this premise. It insists that circumstances dictate inner life. This is precisely the belief Stoicism seeks to uproot. When engaging with negative individuals, the Stoic remains attentive to an important boundary: empathy without absorption. You may acknowledge their feelings without reinforcing their conclusions. You may say internally or externally, "I understand that this is difficult," without agreeing that it is hopeless or unjust beyond repair. One of the most draining aspects of chronic negativity is repetition. The same complaints resurface unchanged week after week. Stoicism advises us to notice patterns. When words cease to lead toward understanding or action, they become noise. Continued exposure to such noise dulls the mind. In these situations, Stoicism permits disengagement. This can be subtle: changing the subject, limiting time spent, or responding briefly rather than emotionally. Disengagement is not cruelty, it is preservation. Seneca warned that the mind must be protected just as carefully as the body. Another Stoic strategy is refusing to mirror emotional tone. Negative people often seek resonance, not solutions. They want others to share their despair, as if collective hopelessness confirms its legitimacy. The Stoic does not argue aggressively against this outlook, but neither do they echo it. Calm neutrality can feel unsettling to those invested in pessimism. It introduces a silent alternative, that one can acknowledge hardship without surrendering to it. Over time, this can either gently shift the dynamic or reveal that distance is necessary. Victimhood often comes with a subtle moral claim. The perpetual victim may believe that suffering grants entitlement, entitlement to attention, exemption from responsibility, or immunity from critique. Stoicism challenges this gently but firmly. Suffering is part of the human condition, not a moral credential. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that pain does not make us better people. How we respond to pain does. This perspective allows the Stoic to respect suffering without glorifying it. It is also crucial to examine why chronic negativity affects us so deeply. Often it resonates with our own unexamined fears. Stoicism encourages self-reflection here. Ask yourself, what in this person's worldview is unsettling me? Is it their helplessness or my fear of becoming the same? By confronting these internal reactions, you strengthen your resilience. You stop blaming the other person for your discomfort and instead use the encounter as a mirror for your own inner work. Stoicism also emphasizes the importance of intentional mental diet. Just as you would not consume spoiled food, you should not consume distorted narratives without scrutiny. This does not mean avoiding all hardship or grief. It means choosing perspectives that emphasize agency, clarity, and growth. There is a limit to how much influence reason can have on someone committed to pessimism. The Stoics understood this. They did not believe philosophy could rescue everyone. Wisdom sometimes lies in knowing when to step back. If distancing yourself feels selfish, Stoicism offers reassurance. Your primary duty is to your own character. Allowing chronic negativity to corrode your clarity serves no one, including the negative person. You cannot offer stability from a place of erosion. At times, the most compassionate act is modeling a different way of being. Quiet steadiness, realistic optimism, and refusal to indulge despair can speak louder than advice. Even if the other person never changes, you have preserved your inner climate. In the next part, we will explore a more socially rewarded form of toxicity: arrogance, entitlement, and the hunger for superiority. These individuals often succeed outwardly, yet leave damage in their wake. We will examine how Stoicism strips away their illusions of dominance and protects our self-respect without hostility. Part 5. The arrogant and the entitled, seeing through the illusion of superiority. Some toxic people do not drain you through conflict, guilt, or despair. They diminish you through condescension. These are the arrogant and the entitled, individuals who believe they are inherently superior, more deserving, or exempt from the standards that apply to others. They may appear confident, successful, or influential, which often makes their behavior socially tolerated or even rewarded. Stoicism views arrogance not as strength, but as a profound misunderstanding of reality. The Stoics believe that worth is measured by character, not status, wealth, or recognition. Anything external can be gained or lost without altering a person's moral value. Arrogant individuals mistake their advantages for virtues. They equate power with wisdom, achievement with merit, and dominance with worth. This illusion allows them to dismiss others' perspectives, violate boundaries, and justify unfair treatment without remorse. Marcus Aurelius, himself an emperor, warned repeatedly against this mindset. Despite ruling the most powerful empire of his time, he reminded himself that rank and titles were temporary and that death would soon render all distinctions meaningless. This reflection was not morbid, it was grounding. When dealing with entitled people, Stoicism begins by removing the pedestal. Their approval is not currency. Their disdain is not a verdict. Once you recognize that their sense of superiority is self-assigned, their behavior loses much of its psychological weight. Arrogance often manifests through dismissal. Your ideas are ignored, your concerns minimized, your efforts taken for granted. The Stoic response is not to demand validation, but to maintain self-respect independent of external acknowledgement. You do not need others to recognize your value in order for it to exist. Epictetus taught that seeking validation from those who lack wisdom is a form of self-impoverishment. When you tie your worth to the opinions of the arrogant, you surrender your autonomy. Another expression of entitlement is the belief that others exist to serve one's needs. Entitled individuals expect accommodation without reciprocity. They react with irritation or disbelief when confronted with limits. Stoicism prepares us for this reaction. When you enforce a boundary, resistance is not evidence of wrongdoing. It is confirmation that the boundary was needed. The Stoic sets limits calmly and consistently. There is no need to justify excessively or to argue about fairness. Reasonable limits stand on their own. If someone responds with disdain or outrage, that response reveals more about them than about you. One of the most powerful Stoic insights is that arrogance often masks insecurity. The need to feel superior usually arises from fear of inadequacy. This does not make arrogant behavior acceptable, but it does make it less intimidating. You are no longer facing a giant, but a person defending a fragile self-image. Stoicism encourages us to see this without contempt. Contempt, like admiration, is a form of emotional entanglement. Both grant power. The Stoic aims for clear-eyed neutrality. It is also important to recognize how social structures reinforce entitlement. Workplaces, families, and institutions often protect arrogant individuals because of their productivity or influence. Stoicism does not deny this reality. It prepares you to navigate it without internalizing injustice. Seneca warned that success without virtue is a dangerous thing. The Stoic understands that external systems may reward poor character, but nature does not. Inner turmoil, fear of loss, and perpetual comparison are the hidden costs of arrogance. When faced with entitlement, the Stoic chooses dignity over submission and over rebellion. You do your work well. You speak truthfully when necessary. You disengage when possible. You do not shrink and you do not escalate. This balance is crucial. Arrogant people often provoke either silence or explosion. Stoicism offers a third path. Steady self-possession. This is deeply unsettling to those who rely on dominance for identity. It is also worth examining our own tendencies toward entitlement. Stoicism demands self-scrutiny. Whenever you feel irritated by others' limitations or believe your time is more valuable than theirs, pause. Arrogance grows quietly. Wisdom interrupts it early. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to remember how many people labored to support his daily comfort. Gratitude dissolves entitlement. Humility restores proportion. Ultimately, Stoicism reframes power. True power is not the ability to dominate others, but the ability to govern oneself. Arrogant individuals may command rooms, but they are often slaves to their own ego. The Stoic is free. In the next part, we will examine the most painful category of all: betrayal, dishonesty, and broken trust. These experiences cut deeply because they threaten our sense of safety and meaning. Stoicism offers not denial, but a way to recover without hardening the heart. Part 6. The Deceivers and the Betrayers. Healing without hardening. Of all toxic behaviors, betrayal cuts the deepest. Deception, broken promises, and violated trust do not merely offend us. They unsettle our sense of reality. When someone we relied on proves unfaithful, dishonest, or self-serving, the injury is not just emotional, it is existential. We begin to question our judgment, our values, and sometimes our willingness to trust at all. The Stoics understood this pain well. They did not romanticize human goodness, nor did they surrender to cynicism. Instead, they held a clear-eyed view of human fallibility. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would act selfishly and dishonestly, not as a rare occurrence, but as part of the human condition. This perspective does not erase pain, but it prevents shock from becoming despair. What devastates us most is often not the act itself, but the belief that it should not have happened. Stoicism asks us to examine that belief. Trust, from a Stoic standpoint, is a judgment. We decide how much confidence to place in another person based on evidence and reason. When that judgment proves incorrect, the Stoic does not collapse into self-blame or universal suspicion. Instead, they refine their discernment. Epictetus warned against giving away inner security too freely. He did not advise isolation, but proportional trust. You trust character where character has been demonstrated, not assumed. When betrayal occurs, the lesson is not that trust is foolish, but that discernment must be sharpened. One of the most dangerous reactions to betrayal is hardening. Cynicism can feel protective, but it quietly poisons future relationships. Stoicism resists this impulse. It teaches that, while others may act unjustly, we are not justified in becoming unjust in response. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to become like the wrongdoer. This is not a moral slogan. It is a psychological truth. When bitterness takes root, the betrayer continues to influence your inner life long after they are gone. Stoicism offers a different path: separation without hatred. You may withdraw trust. You may change the relationship or end it entirely. What you do not do is carry resentment as a companion. This requires understanding the limits of control. You cannot undo the betrayal. You cannot force remorse or accountability. What you can control is how much space the event occupies in your mind. Rumination reopens wounds. The Stoic practices disciplined attention. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Replaying betrayal magnifies its impact. Stoicism encourages us to acknowledge pain fully, then refuse to rehearse it endlessly. Forgiveness, in Stoicism, is not forgetting or excusing. It is releasing the demand that the past be different. You forgive for your own clarity, not for their redemption. Another Stoic insight is recognizing that deception often reveals character rather than destroys it. The betrayal did not create a new person, it exposed an existing pattern. Seeing this can be strangely stabilizing. The world makes sense again. This clarity allows you to adjust expectations without collapsing into distrust. You become neither naive nor guarded, but discerning. Stoicism also cautions against self-idealization. We are capable of error too. Recognizing this fosters humility and prevents moral absolutism. You can condemn an action without condemning humanity. In rebuilding trust, Stoicism emphasizes gradualism. Trust is not restored through words, but through consistent action over time. This applies both to others and to yourself. Learning to trust your judgment again is often the hardest part. The Stoic treats betrayal as a severe but valuable lesson. Pain becomes instruction rather than identity. You are not the one who was betrayed. You are the one who endured, learned, and remained upright. In the next part, we will step back and look at the deeper Stoic toolkit, the daily practices that make dealing with toxic people sustainable over time. These are not reactive strategies, but proactive disciplines that strengthen the mind long before conflict arises. Part 7. The Stoic Daily Practice. Building immunity, not just defense. Up to this point, we have explored different types of toxic people and the specific Stoic responses they require. But Stoicism is not merely a set of situational tactics. It is a way of life. Without daily practice, even the clearest insights fade under pressure. The Stoics understood this well. They did not rely on inspiration, they relied on training. The goal of Stoic practice is not to become invulnerable but resilient. Toxic people will always exist. What changes is how deeply they are able to affect you. Over time, the Stoic mind develops a kind of immunity, not indifference but stability. One of the most important Stoic practices is the discipline of perception. This involves consciously examining how you interpret events. When something happens, you pause and ask whether your reaction is coming from fact or from judgment. Toxic interactions often feel overwhelming because we interpret them as personal, permanent, or catastrophic. Stoicism interrupts this pattern. You remind yourself that this is one moment, one interaction, one person acting according to their nature. It is not a verdict on your worth or a prophecy of future suffering. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to strip situations down to their bare components. Insults become sounds. Betrayal becomes a broken agreement. Arrogance becomes insecurity dressed as confidence. This reduction does not minimize pain, it prevents distortion. Another daily practice is negative visualization. This may sound pessimistic, but it is profoundly stabilizing. You periodically imagine encountering rudeness, dishonesty, ingratitude, or misunderstanding. By rehearsing adversity mentally, you reduce its emotional impact when it occurs. This practice is especially powerful when dealing with known toxic individuals. You remind yourself that they are unlikely to change suddenly. When they behave as expected, you are not disappointed. Expectation management is emotional armor. Stoicism also emphasizes the discipline of desire. Many of our struggles with toxic people stem from wanting what is not ours to command: their approval, their fairness, their self-awareness. The Stoic redirects desire inward, toward character rather than outcomes. You aim to act with patience, courage, and clarity, regardless of how others behave. Success is measured by integrity, not harmony. This shift radically reduces frustration. Evening reflection is another cornerstone of Stoic practice. At the end of the day, the Stoic reviews their actions. Where did emotion override reason? Where did restraint hold? This is not self-punishment, it is calibration. Seneca described this practice as standing before oneself as both judge and student. You observe patterns without shame. Over time, awareness sharpens and emotional reflexes weaken. Stoicism also values simplicity. Many toxic dynamics persist because life is overcrowded with obligations, commitments, and people. The Stoic periodically asks, what can be removed? Less exposure means fewer wounds. This is not isolation. It is intentional living. You choose relationships that support clarity and growth. You limit those that erode it. Another essential practice is voluntary discomfort. By occasionally choosing difficulty, physical exertion, restraint, silence, you remind yourself that you can endure discomfort without panic. Toxic behavior often hurts because it makes us uncomfortable. Training discomfort weakens its power. Marcus Aurelius slept on hard surfaces and ate simple meals at times, not because comfort was wrong, but because he did not want to be ruled by it. The modern equivalent may be far less extreme, but the principle remains. Gratitude also plays a quiet but vital role. It anchors the mind in sufficiency. When you are grounded in what is already good, Toxic people have less leverage. They cannot convince you that everything is lacking. Stoicism is not about becoming emotionally sterile. It is about becoming emotionally governed. You still care, but you choose how and how much. Perhaps the most important practice is remembering impermanence. People change. Situations end. Conflicts fade. Even the most painful relationships are temporary in the scope of a life. This perspective does not erase pain, but it prevents despair. In the next and final part, we will bring everything together. We will return to the core Stoic question: how do we live well among imperfect people? And how do we walk away from toxic influence without losing our humanity? Part 8, Living Among Imperfect People, the Stoic Resolution. At the end of all Stoic reflection on toxic people, one truth remains unavoidable. You will never live in a world free of them. Wherever there are human beings, there will be ignorance, insecurity, fear, and misdirected desire. Stoicism does not promise escape from this reality. It offers something more durable: the ability to live well within it. Marcus Aurelius did not write his reflections from a quiet retreat. He wrote them from military camps, political turmoil, and personal loss. He ruled over a world filled with betrayal, flattery, incompetence, and cruelty. And yet, his central concern was not how to control others, but how to remain just, rational, and steady amid disorder. This is the Stoic resolution. The world does not need to be good for you to be good. Throughout this journey, we have examined many forms of toxicity: provocation, manipulation, pessimism, arrogance, and betrayal. Each one threatens peace in a different way, but they all rely on the same vulnerability: the surrender of inner authority. Stoicism exists to reclaim that authority. When you stop demanding that others be different, you free yourself from endless disappointment. Acceptance is not approval, it is the recognition of reality without resistance. From that clarity, wise action becomes possible. Stoicism teaches that you always have three options when facing toxic influence: endure, engage, or withdraw. Endurance is virtuous when it strengthens character. Engagement is justified when it serves reason and justice. Withdrawal is wise when proximity corrodes the soul. None of these choices require guilt. They require judgment. One of the hardest lessons is learning that walking away does not mean you have failed. It often means you have understood. Distance can be an act of self-respect, not abandonment. Even Marcus Aurelius acknowledged that some people cannot be reasoned with, and that preserving one's moral health may require separation. At the same time, Stoicism guards against bitterness. You do not withdraw in anger, nor do you endure in resentment. You choose with clarity. Perhaps the most radical Stoic idea is this: no one can harm your character without your consent. They may harm your body, your reputation, or your circumstances, but your integrity, judgment, and capacity for virtue remain yours alone. This does not make pain disappear, but it gives pain meaning. Suffering becomes something you pass through, not something that defines you. Stoicism also reminds us to remain humble. We are all someone else's difficult person at times. Recognizing this softens judgment and keeps philosophy from becoming arrogance in disguise. The goal is not superiority, but alignment with reason. As you move forward, remember that dealing with toxic people is not a one-time achievement. It is a lifelong practice. Some days you will respond with patience and clarity. Other days, you will fall short. Stoicism allows for this. Progress, not perfection, is the aim. When you encounter toxicity again, and you will, return to first principles. Ask what is within your control. Examine your judgments. Act according to virtue, then let go of the rest. In doing so, you build what the Stoics valued most: a stable inner life that does not depend on favorable conditions. You become, in Marcus Aurelius's words, like a cliff against which the waves continually break, yet which he stands firm. The world may remain chaotic. People may remain flawed, but you can remain steady. And that, the Stoics believed, is enough. If you like this video, if you think you're one step closer to building the character you've always wanted, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you.